Shed take two. Okay, so I'm not a big hardcore guy, and I'm definitely not a youth crew kind of guy, and especially back in 2010 when my friend Tom first introduced me to Title Fight. Yet there's something about them that made me fall in love with them the very moment I heard Symmetry. You know, and I'm not the only one, right? They have way more monthly listeners on Spotify than any of the bands that inspired them, and even any of the bands that were in their contemporary scene who have continued releasing music. There's something about this band that even the thick end of a decade after they called it quits still keeps people coming back, to the point where I'm spending my Saturday making a video about it. So if you would please indulge me, I would love to spend some time talking to you about why I love Title Fight so much. And if you're a musician or a creative, what are some of the lessons that we can maybe learn from their success to apply to our own endeavours? I want to start with something that I think is probably a little bit unexpected. Branding. That might feel like a weird place to start, because surely we should talk about songwriting, and we will talk about songwriting. I think if someone's making a video about you more than a decade after you released your most successful album, then probably good songwriting it's a given. But there's something about the way Title Fight did branding that really set them apart from other bands in their scene at the time. Brace yourself for the most pretentious sentence in this video. There's a real deftness to the way they combined elements of a nostalgic aesthetic with a kind of urgency that really can only come with youth. A lot of the time when we think about branding for bands, to me anyway, it kind of brings to mind like local bands wearing masks or deciding that they're all going to wear variations on the same suit.
What kind of look do you think we should go for? I was thinking, what was I thinking? Zoot suits. Zoot suits. Definitely zoot suits.
But really it's about creating a consistent aesthetic in a 1,000 small decisions that you might make as a band. And yes, that includes things like the way you dress, the way you take promo photos, but it also includes things like the way you shoot videos, the way you write, record, arrange your music, your artwork choices, the decisions that you make around your merchandise. Every single one of those touch points when it comes to Title Fight feels like it's been considered and has a greater purpose in serving the whole. It doesn't feel like a bunch of random abstract decisions, certainly not at least in the Shed and Floral Green eras. If we focus in on one example just to illustrate that point, every single music video from Shed or from Floral Green was shot either on videotape or 8mm film. There is nothing shot on digital, even though at the time the industry had largely switched over to digital at that point. The famous example being the Shed making of documentary was originally not just shot, but released on VHS. In 2011, a time where most people had long chucked their VHS players in the bin, The use of analog media here really does create a sense of kind of timelessness and nostalgia that is very consistent with their music, being inspired by these bands from previous generations. It's a beautiful combination of style and substance that, for me, makes something greater than the sum of its parts. If I compare that with the digitally shot videos they released in support of Hyperview, like the Chlorine video, for example, it's lost that feeling of aesthetic cohesion for me. The digital feels totally out of keeping with the music, totally out of keeping with the rest of those branding decisions that the band makes, and it just doesn't connect with me emotionally then in the same way. So I can almost hear the criticism coming through the screen that using analog media isn't that interesting, especially in our current era where we have such a huge revival of film photography and things like that. But when you consider the context in which this stuff was released, it actually starts to become a bit more significant. So Instagram, the entire platform, was 6 months old when Title Fight released the first single off of Shed. This idea that everyone just slaps these kind of like analog lo-fi filters on things, that was really novel. It didn't need to look this way. It wasn't the norm at the time to employ analog technology or even emulate analog technology in the way that it is today. This was a very conscious decision to marry the visual aesthetic of the band with their songwriting, which really throws back to older hardcore youth crew emo sounds. YouTube at this point already had support for 4K video, and here's Title Fight uploading a series of 4:3 aspect ratio videos shot on film, shot on videotape, terrible frame rates. Like, this is a conscious decision to elicit emotion from the audience. And when you combine that with the 1,000 other decisions to create this aesthetic coherence, it adds up and it creates a powerful sense of nostalgia and timelessness. But as I'm alluding to, those visual branding decisions really only work so well because they are in service of the music. Outside of punk and hardcore, guitar-based music in the early 2010s had got pretty weird. I mean, around this time, Periphery had fully made djents into a genre, and you had 1,000 bedroom copycats doing stuff with super complicated rhythms, glitchy production, very digital. Some of the guitar parts were so complicated that people were recording them at half speed and speeding them up in their DAWs afterwards. You will find none of that on 2011's Shed. When it comes to production, metal at the time had this rise of the one-man bedroom artist recording every single instrument independently by themselves, programming drums, all that kind of stuff. Shed was recorded with the band live in a room. They did a couple of overdubs on the guitars and the vocals, but otherwise it was literally the band playing together, and we'll record what we get. Shed in particular, there's no fancy guitar effects. We've got a couple of Les Pauls going into a couple of Marshall style amps. That's pretty much it. Just for contrast, I want to show you a tracking session I am working on right now for one of my projects. Look at the amount of guitars that are in here. Different layers, different tones, all that kind of stuff. Now let's look at the tracking session for the Shed cover that I played at the beginning of this video. 2 rhythm guitars, a bass, 1 lead overdub, drums, 1 main vocal and an overdub. That's everything. For me, that conscious decision to limit the amount of tracks they recorded, the amount of overdubs they did, to record in a room together, it creates a very intimate vibe it feels like I'm listening to the band live. And I don't think there's any coincidence that these songs translated so well to a live setting. Safe in Your Skin is probably the ultimate example of this for me. You've got Jamie on your left-hand side and Shane on your right. Jamie starts the song with solo guitar, and then eventually Shane joins him, but they're not playing exactly the same part. They're playing the same notes, but the way they articulate it, even their strumming patterns, are slightly different. And it creates a real sense of being there in a live room. It doesn't feel too rehearsed, it doesn't feel too stiff. It creates a real feeling of intimacy, which, given the painfully honest subject matter, for me is incredibly effective, incredibly affecting. It's a brilliant production and arrangement decision that helps convey the emotion of the song much more powerfully than if it had been done with a perfect arrangement. Transition into Where Am I? It's those kind of things that make Shed feel like a very cohesive and well thought out record, especially when you compare it to the collection of songs and EPs that they had previously released with The Last Thing You Forget. The audacity to drop this record 16 months after Shed is staggering. Like, I think part of it is because I was 19, obviously, but music at that point felt so exciting to me. It felt like there were so many bands coming through, and this little scene in particular really felt like there was something fresh and interesting to discover pretty much constantly. Shoegaze is having a bit of a moment again now, but it's really hard to overstate how, when this record came out in 2012, overnight, people were going out and buying fuzz pedals and cranking the reverb on their amps. Oh my God, especially local bands. Like, local bands at this time, all of a sudden, everybody had a Big Muff and a reverb pedal, and it was inescapable. Floral Green keeps the wistful, nostalgic vibe, but adds a layer of maturity that I think really differentiates it from Shed, even though those two albums released so close to one another. For me, it really crystallizes around what I consider to be the absolute best title fight song ever released, Lefty. The guitars are slow, swirling. I think these chords are beautiful, and I think they would sound brilliant on a clean guitar, but you add that oscillating fuzz, that feedback from those delay pedals on top of it, and it creates something which is just an extra elevation on top of it. The other thing that stands out to me is just how different the lyrical approach is to anything we had on Shed. We've gone in just over a year from lyrics that were pretty literal to something more impressionistic. But they are still devastatingly raw.
While you were sleeping, I was glad. Sharp eyes and nothing, such a stone. I'm squeezing tight, don't let the light in. No medicine.
I don't know what the lyrics in Lefty are truly about, but I can tell you that they resonate deeply with my experience of loss and my desire to keep those positive, happy memories of my daughter alive. I think that's the power of abstract lyrics. You know, I first heard this song when I was 19, and the feelings of wistfulness and longing that it evoked in me really were tied to anxieties about growing up. I was leaving for university and realizing that in order to have the future that I'd imagined for myself, I was going to have to give up and sacrifice some things that I cared deeply about. Now in my 30s, the feelings of wistfulness that this song stirs in me are the same, but the memories and experiences it draws upon are very, very different. I think in a weird way, it's like, although the digital audio file that's on my hard drive is exactly the same, this song in many ways has grown and changed just as much in the last 12 years as I have. I never went to the last UK title fight shows. Hyperview had come out by that point, and I just didn't connect with it in the same way that I had with everything else. I remember thinking to myself, I've seen him loads of times before, didn't really like the last album, I'll catch him next time. And obviously that opportunity never came. I didn't know in the moment how special that time was. I put it down to the arrogance of youth. I was too young and too naive to understand that things I loved weren't always going to be there, that nothing in life is promised. Maybe I need to revisit Hyperview. Maybe I need to try Glitterer. As cheesy as it sounds, and it does sound very cheesy, don't live your life with your head in the ceiling fan. The things that you love won't always be there.